Good afternoon. My name is Tom, and I am once again acting as the substitute host for this channel of sorts. It is, of course, not my choice to be here. I owed a favor to the usual host of this channel. Normally, I am most known as the manager of a asset-based investment firm centered around whiskey. Recently, however, I have been interested in rum investments, and I managed to avoid a terrible mistake in that endeavor, thanks to the help of Scott, the normal host of this affair. You see, I was going to buy, in my ignorance, several cases of the Hamden Great House. That was my plan, and then Scott very kindly corrected me and pointed me towards the endemic bird series, particularly the OWH mash bill. For my fellow investors, the OWH mash bill is the best one. That is the one you want to buy. And so instead I bought almost the entire Midwestern allocation of that instead of the Great House. So I am extremely grateful to him. But the payment for that was my being forced to do another video of this sort. I have no comprehension of why the world needs video reviews of this kind, but that was the deal. And I am sure Scott thought he was very clever handing me this particular rum to review, this Overproof Jamaican rum. I'm sure he is giggling, believing that I'm supposed to say that it is irrelevant, that I have no interest in such things, perhaps gagging at the smell of it. I'm not sure exactly. In fact, none of these things. Before he'd even asked me to do this, I had already bought a pallet of Charley's, and it is currently on its way to the States. So let me pour this, and I will tell you more about it. Now, why would a whiskey investor and a whiskey investment fund manager be interested in a unaged? Although there is an interesting tint to this. I'm not sure if you can see. The nature of this exact rum is totally unclear to me. But why would I be interested in this? Do I want to drink it? No, of course not. Spirits, whiskey above all, but all spirits are an investment. To drink it would be to literally piss away your money. This, too, is an investment, and it is a particular kind of hedge against the future of the whiskey market. More on that in a moment. But let me talk for a moment about this sample here. This is Charley's JB Overproof Jamaican Rum Trelawny Blend. Now, the general background of this involves a tradition in Jamaica known as Crow Batty. And the background is that the workers at distilleries in Jamaica could not actually buy the rum that they were producing. Either it was too expensive or it was being immediately shipped off to be blended somewhere else or sold somewhere else. What they did have access to and what they could steal rather easily was the refuse, the leftovers, the heads and the tails left over from distillation that had been cut. The feints, as we call them in bourbon. So what they would do is they would steal some of these things, take them off, and drink them at home with friends. Now, these were rather dangerous to drink, of course, and they smelled absolutely terrible. Now, a John Crow, in Jamaican slang, is a turkey vulture. It is a buzzard. And a batty it's a behind. It is a posterior. So the thought was to consume this rum, these heads and tails rums. You needed to have a gut as strong as a buzzard, and of course the smell was like the behind of a buzzard. Whence Crow Batty. Now, this particular offering, Charley's, is not a bottle of heads and tails. What it is is a kind, or what has become in the tradition is a kind of homage to that. The JB, whatever else the makers intend it to be, has become shorthand for John Crow Batty. It is popular with, this is very cheap, so it has become popular with the poor on the island, and let's say the hipsters. So you can think of it as the Jamaican equivalent to something like Pabst Blue Ribbon, for example. That is the general background of this. It is still a bit unclear to me, but this is apparently a product of the Wray and Nephew organization, so a neighbor to that other more famous white overproof rum. Could also be made at the same distillery, New Yarmouth. I'm not sure about that either. What is clear is that it is a particularly pungent example of the Jamaican overproof rum genre. I will now deliver tasting notes on this rum, as is customary for the purposes of this channel. This is bottled at 63% alcohol by volume. I will now smell this rum. The smell is pickles and brine in whipped cream. Now, the whipped cream element in this is extremely interesting because it suggests that there is a column stilled element in this, as with Wray and Nephew. I do not believe this is entirely pot distillate. There is some black olive, the canned artichoke hearts, the ones in oil, if you have ever had those. Some fried plantains, fresh ginger, pickled ginger as well. Baked sweet potato, candied carrots. The peas that are a little bit of lighter green, that are a little bit not rancid, but particularly ripe smelling. Ripe peas. And a very obvious smoked paprika note. This is an extremely concentrated, intense nose on the palate. It is extremely big and intense and concentrated. It is sweet and savory and vegetal all at the same time. This is Wray and Nephew's meaner, bigger brother, essentially. That is the function it is playing to my palate. So we are once again getting some things from the nose. The candied new potatoes note, some white pepper, carrots again, the sweet potatoes again, a certain hot chili pepper note, a Scotch bonnet pepper note, which you will find all over in island cuisine. There is a very prominent root beer note in this, as strange as that may sound. Fried plantains again, then more olive juice, and a little bit more whipped cream as well. The finish is quite long. It is covering my entire mouth. It is a little bit astringent and metallic, and has a little bit of a character of rotting flowers, something like that. I'm not entirely convinced that I like the finish on this rum, to the extent that I like any taste whatsoever, given that my only passion is making money. Now, what I shall do in the tradition of this channel is add water to this, give it a few moments, and try it again to see how the flavors develop given water. That needs one more squirt to be a sufficient amount of water. So you may ask, Tom, why would you be interested in buying a full pallet of something like this intense backwoods, not even moonshine, but something akin to that? Well, in fact, it's a rather complicated story, but it involves my discovering what has essentially been an open secret on the markets for not very long, a few weeks maybe, which is that the probability guys, I don't know the math, don't expect me to explain the math to you, have basically come to the conclusion that it's very likely that given the medical advances we've seen in the last year or so with the pandemic, it is very likely that we will, within the next decade, we will be able to extend human life indefinitely. Now, what does that have to do with Jamaican rum? Well, here's the thing. There will not be enough immortality to go around, right? It will go to the rich, the extremely rich, and to the extremely powerful. And those people will skew white, American and European. They will skew a little bit male, and they will skew older. For the most part, boomers, a few lucky folks in older generations, and a few lucky Gen Xers. In other words, the heart and soul of the bourbon drinking demographic. So, a few immediate takeaways from this. Let's go first of all with so these immortal bourbon drinkers will almost certainly use the immense power granted to them by immortality, to go from essentially owning almost all of the world to owning the entire world. So if you have had ambitions and plans to contribute to the world in any way, artistically, scientifically, through innovation of any sort, I would suggest you leave those behind, or at least put them on the side burner, and begin to try to put yourself in a position where you can cater to the whims and the needs of the bourbon overlords. And you may, I realize this is probably not the world you were looking for. It's not the world I was looking for either, although granted, the world I would prefer is a world devoid of life, full of nothing but warehouses as far as the eye can see. But in any case, this is not what I would want either, and I too am making preparations. For example, I have already started my own Eagles cover band. But it's not my job to tell you what you want to hear. It is my job to give you good financial advice. So, the second thing to note is the effect on the whiskey market in this kind of scenario. What happens to the bourbon markets and to the wider whiskey market? Well, you may be thinking, well, Tom, you're a fund manager. This sounds like your lucky day. You should be ecstatic. You'll have whiskey drinkers, well, really bourbon drinkers, ruling the world. But no, absolutely not. This would be a disaster for me. I am a bourbon collector, not a bourbon drinker. We are natural enemies. And what you have to understand is the sort of immortality treatments these people would be getting will render them near immune to the effects of alcohol. I would expect them to have to drink gallons and gallons and gallons of the stuff in order to get a decent buzz on. We will see bourbon consumption by these people, the likes of which we have never seen in human history. And the effect of that will initially be a rise in market prices, but I expect what will happen is that the bourbon overlords will use their immense power to turn against the collectors because, we are natural enemies, right? They want to drink our stocks. I don't think they will outright seize bourbon stockpiles. What I expect is that they will simply declare that bourbon and like spirits cannot be sold except at retail prices, which will immediately reduce all of our collection's value by orders of magnitude. I don't know. These people have an obsession with retail price. It basically just means whatever website they happen to be looking at any given time, or whatever they happen to believe that is. But whatever, they're going to be the ones with all the power, right? So I will be out of a job in any case. So this will be effectively the end of the whiskey collection market. So you may ask at that point, okay, is something like Charley's going to play a role is it going to replace the whiskey collection market somehow? How is this supposed to work? Not exactly. You see, Consider the effects of the incompetent bourbon drinkers currently running the world, continuing to run the world with even more power and money and immortality in their hands. They're going to mismanage it into the ground. And I expect what you will have after that, economically, is a reduction to a system of simple barter, right? Because the bourbon overlords will officially own everything, meaning that all the actual economic activity has to be done on a black market, under the table. Simple trading of goods and services back and forth. And in that scenario, one of the most useful items to have on hand for trading is going to be alcohol. The stronger the better. But it cannot be, bourbon, right? Because that's going to immediately go to the bosses. It cannot be anything bourbon-like because they're going to want to drink that. What you want is a kind of alcohol that is as far removed from the sensibilities of the bourbon gods who will be running the world as possible. And what would that be? Baijiu, I hear you say. Baijiu would be a good guess. But I think a simpler play and a better play would be something like Charley's JB Overproof from Jamaica. I have bought a pallet of this as a hedge against, bourbon drinkers becoming immortal. And that is the idea. I will be selling off my collection. If none of this happens, terrific. My collection of Charley's didn't cost very much money. It's not much of a loss. I'll be fine. But if it does, I can happily sell off my Charley's for food and shelter and clean water and basic services for decades. And that seems like a good way to prepare for the unthinkable. So that is why I have invested in this. And if you have the funds, I suggest you follow a similar path. Moaning Musk under Overproof might be worth a look too. All right, let us return to this now that it has had a chance to air out a bit, and now that you understand my investment decisions. The nose on this Charley's JB Overproof with water does not change significantly. It is much the same. There is a rock candy element that has become more prominent. There is more smoked paprika. And actually, there is a more general smoky element, not peat or charcoal. This is perhaps a plastic smoke, a pleasant plastic smoke, or aromatic cigarettes. On the palate, we shall see how else this changes. I will now taste this rum again. With water, this becomes much, considerably sweeter. There's a lot of rock candy, but also tree roots, ground pepper, that smoke, the aromatic cigarettes kind of smoke. The sweetness, along with the sort of rotting flowers note that I mentioned earlier, is actually getting in the way on the finish a bit. Very interesting, very complex, very dense as a spirit. But the finish does get a little bit cloying. If I were to rate this rum as this channel does, on a scale out of 100, I would give this an 87 minus. The minus is there because of the slightly cloying, slightly unpleasant nature of the finish. However, I believe it is a extremely worthwhile and interesting spirit for those of you who are interested in drinking things like this. But I think its real value is as a investment option and as a hedge against the worst case scenario. And that is my conclusion. I don't know why you would be... I don't believe this video has been educational in any way, except perhaps to improve your investment choices for the future. I do hope it has done that. I hope you take my advice very seriously. But in any case, I hope this has been useful in some way, to the extent that any of the videos on this channel are useful. Thank you for watching.